Now the latest ITV News in the Border region with Pam Royal and Ian Payne.
Hello, welcome to Look Around with a full half hour of news and sport for Cumbria and the south of Scotland. The main headlines tonight.
Why did the people of Copeland reject Labour and return their first Conservative MP for more than 80 years? We'll be analysing the fallout from last week's by-election and speaking to voters.
Because Jeremy Corbyn is against nuclear, I think that stopped a lot of people from voting for Labour.
Well, I'm hoping this could see him away, really.
40 years after this bridge collapsed in heavy floods, Selkirk has unveiled a £31 million flood protection scheme.
And we meet one of the movers and shakers of the region's textile industry, a man who predicted the challenge from cheap Chinese exports and encouraged local firms to go upmarket to survive. Hello from Ian and from me, and welcome to tonight's programme.
Copeland's new Conservative MP, Trudy Harrison, began her first day in her new job today. She headed down from West Cumbria to Westminster, the first Conservative to represent that part of the region since 1935.
As she prepares to be officially sworn in on Wednesday, the inquest into what went so badly wrong for Labour continues. Laurie Carnahan has spent the day in the constituency to find out why so many of the party's former supporters failed to support them this time.
It was business as usual in Whitehaven today, but the talk of the town was still very much of the Tories' victory at the by-election. Copeland had been a Labour heartland for more than 80 years, but speaking to people in the street today, it's clear who they're pointing the finger at. You've voted for Labour your whole life and you chose not to. Why was that?
Simple. I don't believe in the man that's at the top of the hill.
Do you still have faith in the Labour Party and Jeremy Corbyn then?
No, not at all. No, I think that's the reason that it all went wrong.
I voted Labour, just solely for the hospital. As far as politicians go, none of them's worth nothing.
The Prime Minister visited Copeland on Friday to congratulate Trudy Harrison on her victory. It will now be up to her to deliver on the promises.
I am sceptical. I hope she can do something for the area, especially obviously the NHS, hospital, and about the pensions with regards to Sellafield.
Tim Knowles has been a county councillor in Copeland for 16 years and was disappointed not to be shortlisted as a Labour candidate. He told me that Corbyn's track record on the nuclear industry was seriously damaging. How sad is it for you, having represented these people for so many years, knowing that the trust has been lost perhaps because of what's happening at Westminster?
It's desperately sad, but to be fair, we have to do better here locally as well. It's not simply London's fault, although I think a lot of it has to do with that. We have to perform better. We have to convince people that they're the ones who've got their interests at heart.
So why did the Copeland by-election turn out as it did? A look at the voting figures shows the full story of the night. First of all, the turnout was significantly down. At the 2015 general election, almost 40,000 people turned out to vote. This time, it was around 8,000 fewer. And Labour seems to have been hit the hardest by that smaller turnout. Their vote crashed by more than 5,000 votes. The Conservatives, by contrast, were largely unaffected. Their supporters did turn out, and their vote stayed almost the same as 2 years ago. Like Labour, UKIP seems to have been badly affected by the smaller turnout, dropping by more than 4,000 votes. The Lib Dems did better than in 2015, gaining almost 1,000 votes, and the other candidates were virtually unchanged. High-profile campaigns from all parties shone a light on the big issues in Copeland, like the fight to save services at the West Cumberland Hospital.
I'm hoping the fact that, regardless of the fact that it's a Conservative and a Conservative government, I'm hoping the fact that such a historic vote has been given, such a historic mandate, that will send a message to Westminster that this voice has to be heard. You know, even if we get one trick out of this, you know, it's got to be the hospital. We have to save that hospital and the services.
Copeland Mayor Mike Starkey will now work with Trudy Harrison when big decisions have to be made over the likes of the new nuclear development at Moorside and the upgrading of the A595.
So, you know, I would hope now that some of the pledges that's been made by some of the high-profile politicians like Chris Grayling and others can now be followed through. And I'll certainly be working as closely as I can with Trudy, you know, on things like the infrastructure, the new build at Moorside. And, you know, it's clearly important that we work together to press for retaining services at the hospital.
The political big hitters may be long gone, but when it comes to what's going on at Westminster, the people of Copeland have shouted loud and clear. Laurie Carnahan, ITV News, Whitehaven.
We can cross live now to our political correspondent Daniel Hewitt, who's at Westminster. Dan, Jeremy Corbyn says he's staying on as Labour leader until at least the 2020 general election. So how are others reacting to the result in Copeland?
The vast majority of Labour MPs, Pam, have spent much of the weekend and much of today pulling their hair out at Jeremy Corbyn's response to that defeat in Copeland. Disaster is a word I've heard a lot. Their frustrations focus solely, almost solely, on the range of excuses given by the Corbyn leadership team as to that defeat in Copeland, very few of which focus on Jeremy Corbyn's handling of the Labour Party right now. Jeremy Corbyn's strongest ally, John McDonnell, the Shadow Chancellor, has said that there is a new plot to oust Jeremy Corbyn. He says there are elements within the Labour Party and elements within the media that have launched a soft coup to destroy him. Now, Jeremy Corbyn was asked about that today. He decided not to answer it, but he did give this very short statement about the defeat in Copeland.
There was obviously disappointment in Copeland. We will learn the lessons from that disappointment and we'll win Copeland back. And I want to say thank you to all those colleagues that went to Copeland to work there today.
Now, the Parliamentary Labour Party is meeting tonight, a chance for Labour MPs to hear from Andrew Gwynn, the Greater Manchester MP who coordinated the campaign in Copeland. It's a debrief, if you will, as to what went wrong in that campaign. Now, I'm told that Jeremy Corbyn has no plans to attend that meeting, though many MPs have said to us that he should go. There is, though, a reluctance to publicly criticise Jeremy Corbyn, simply because the last time MPs tried to oust him, it only made him stronger. So many MPs are sitting on their hands, staying silent, hoping performances like Copeland in the end speak for themselves.
Interesting times. Thanks very much, Daniel Hewitt in Westminster for us. Thank you.
Well, there's more on Labour's troubles in a special edition of Representing Border later tonight. Peter McMahon presents highlights from their conference this weekend. That's the Scottish Labour Party in Perth. And he speaks to the former General Secretary of the party, the South of Scotland MP, Colin Smith.
Well, I think the jury's still very much out when it comes to Jeremy's performance. I think he'll be the first person to admit that the performance hasn't been as strong as it needs to be to reconnect to voters and to make sure we are putting a challenge up to this government. I believe this Tory government at UK level is there for the taking, frankly. I think that the damage they're doing to the country, particularly after the referendum, is something that we have to fight. And I think that we do have an opportunity to take that fight to the Tories. And I hope that Jeremy will set that out in the months ahead.
And if you're in Representing Border at 11:50, and if you're not in Scotland, you can find it on our website after that.
A man accused of murdering the mother of his 2 children was found by police standing beside her and covered in her blood. Miklos Verabes pleaded not guilty to murder and 3 counts of raping 33-year-old Melinda Karossi. When the police arrived at her house on Orton Road in Carlisle on September the 15th last year, she was already fatally injured. The trial at Carlisle Crown Court is expected to last for 2 weeks.
A 22-year-old man has been seriously injured in a crash on the A595 at Mealsgate this morning. The incident, involving a Ford Focus and an HGV, happened at around 7:30. The driver of the car was airlifted to hospital in Newcastle. A new flood protection scheme for Selkirk was officially opened this morning. It cost more than £31 million.
It'll provide protection for around 600 homes and businesses. The local rugby club, which has been badly hit in recent years, is among those breathing a sigh of relief. Ivana Holland reports.
It was a large turnout this morning for the opening of Selkirk's flood protection scheme. The project has been 8 years in the making, and locals were glad to see it finally completed.
I'm very pleased with the flood protection scheme because it means my chickens don't get flooded every year. So for yourself, you've been affected by flooding in the past?
Oh yes, some of my chickens are quite good swimmers.
Amazing piece. It's been great watching it go up actually. It's been, you know, a great experience watching it all come together.
I remember the last big flood when people were out of the houses in Bannerfield for months and months, so hopefully that's not going to happen again. So.
That big flood was back in 1977 when the Ettrick waters split the town in two by collapsing the Olney Road Bridge. Since then there have been 2 instances of flash flooding in 2003 and 2004, which prompted the legislation to get this protection scheme underway.
It was the very first piece of legislation I put through when I was first made a minister back in 2009, which is great for me to then be here to see this is the first major flood protection scheme brought in under that piece of legislation. So it somehow seems fitting, but the real beneficiaries of this scheme, of course, are the 600 and odd households in Selkirk that can now be confident that they're not going to be subjected to the kind of history of flooding that they had become accustomed to.
3,400 metres of flood wall have been erected, 10,000 trees have been planted and 5 new footbridges have been installed. There's been plenty of disruption to the residents of Selkirk.
They've then worked with the council whilst it's been constructed, and really the Selkirk community have been fabulous and deserve a great deal of credit for the way they've put up with all the works going on around them. But I think the finished article leaves something for Selkirk which is a very significant legacy.
In fact, according to the project manager, the scheme is already beginning to pay off.
Well, the scheme protects against both the Ettrick, which is behind us, and also the Long Philip burn, which comes through the Bannerfield housing estate. On Saturday, as Councillor Parker referenced earlier today, the water levels in the Long Philip burn were such that without the scheme, there would have been localised flooding heading towards the rugby club once again.
The local rugby club suffered in 2003 when they had to replace their pitch and bar rooms, only to be hit again 15 months later.
We played Gala on the Saturday to open the new pitch, and lo and behold, we got flooded the following Friday. I didn't think it'll ever happen now. You know, when you see what's been done, I couldn't imagine ever the place being flooded again. I would say I was here in '77 when it was flooded, and that came from the river, but every other floods came from the Long Philip burn. But I think the place is quite safe now.
There's a palpable sense of relief for the town of Selkirk, with the focus now turning to Hoyke's flood protection scheme. Ivana Holland, ITV News, Selkirk.
A conference exploring the issues around suicide prevention has been taking place in Cumbria. More than 200 healthcare professionals went to the event, and its aim was to give people an insight into what techniques are being used to prevent suicides.
One of the keynote speakers was Rory O'Connor, a professor of psychology at Glasgow University. I spoke to him earlier and asked him what today's conference was hoping to achieve.
Well, what we're hoping to achieve today is bring together experts from across the country and those working in the front line in terms of suicide prevention to get the best evidence, the latest evidence of why we think people kill themselves, a better understanding of the complexity, and then crucially, what can we do better to prevent suicide.
And crucially, the location for your conference, because our part of the world, Cumbria and the south of Scotland, both have suicide rates above the national average. So today's conference and lessons could be particularly helpful for professionals working in our region.
Oh, absolutely. And one of the things we're trying to do is focus in on what are the unique characteristics of the south of Scotland, or Scotland more generally, and the northeast. What are the characteristics which may increase risk? So, for example, we know the rural dimension is absolutely key. Disadvantage is key. But really, we need to look at how do we provide services and support for a really disparate group of people across a rural community.
The Cumbria branch of Samaritans actually has launched a project recently. They've started to put up signs in places that are known to be places where suicides have taken place more than once. And we've seen this in other parts of the country. I mean, that's intervening at the very late stage, clearly, but at every step, perhaps somebody can be helped.
It's really, really important work, because we know that areas of concern, if we intervene with signs and Samaritans call lines, that we know that that works to prevent suicide. It's a really, really important area. And indeed, we recently published the International Handbook of Suicide Prevention. And we looked at the evidence out there for these late interventions, as you described them, and the evidence is pretty good that if we intervene even at that late stage, we can prevent suicide.
And equally, I would imagine very early intervention also, listening to somebody, talking to somebody, must all be part of the key message from today's conference.
Absolutely. So many of the delegates today are working at the front line with people who are vulnerable, people who are suicidal. So in addition to helping people who are really, really high risk towards the end of or close to a suicide attempt, really working early intervention is crucial with our young men and our young women, but in particular with men. Men are not reaching out. Most people who kill themselves aren't in contact with clinical services. We need to challenge the stigma around suicide so more people reach out and ensure that the services and supports are available for them.
Professor O'Connor, thank you for talking to us.
Thank you.
Still to come on tonight's Look Around, we'll have all the sport, including
the blues for Carlisle United as they suffer a heavy home defeat.
And as we head towards the end of February, the signs are there that spring is on the way, but there's a distinct feel of winter over the next few days. I'll have more later.
Now, tonight's Border Life programme meets one of the movers and shakers of the textile industry in the south of Scotland.
Yes, he foresaw the Chinese moving into clothing manufacture and undercutting British firms. So he encouraged local companies to go upmarket to survive. Here's Emma Baker.
This week, we're talking to one of the leading figures in the Borders textile industry. James Sugden was instrumental in taking it to the very highest end of the market. It was a move they were forced to make in order to survive, prompted by developments on the other side of the world.
These slopes have known the awe-inspiring cries of fierce Mughal warriors and have shuddered under the pounding of marauding horsemen. So the legend of the Kashmir Fleece is a wild one for these haunted parts. Yet legend it is, for the famous wool has travelled this same exhausting route for more than 7 centuries.
My first exposure to China was in the late 1980s. I decided that I needed to go and visit China, largely to secure a supply chain for cashmere. And I went out, knowing nobody, complete country cousin, into the depths of Tianjin and northern China and Mongolia. It was quite a palaver getting to China. You had to have an invitation, a visa and so on. Currency was very heavily controlled. And communication was diabolical. And I can remember going back to a very dark hotel, and there were power cuts at that time and the electricity supply wasn't very good. And then having to queue up at midnight to get my place on the telex machine, to telex the mill back to say, I've spent £100,000, can you make sure we've got the letter of credit in place for tomorrow morning? And that's how far back the Dark Ages China was, and that was only 1989.
Things were starting to change in the textile industry, and business was starting to gradually move away to China. How much of that could you see?
It was quite clear that very quickly the mass market for, or the bulk market for classic knitwear was going to move offshore, which is exactly what happened.
And if you'd like to see more on that story, Border Life is on tonight, and if you're in Scotland you can watch it at 8 o'clock right here on ITV, and if you're not watching in Scotland it's on our website after that. Time for sport now, and plenty to talk about because a huge win for Scotland in the Six Nations. Carlisle United's promotion battle suffers a setback and an imminent end to the speculation over the club's billionaire investor. Ryan Dollard is live at Brunton Park for us. So where shall we begin, Ryan?
Well, where to begin indeed, Pam. Why don't we start with United's game at the weekend, where they weren't really as bad as the scoreline would suggest, but their 3-0 defeat at the hands of Portsmouth leaves things very tight indeed at the top of League Two.
United could have cut Portsmouth 9 points adrift and moved closer to the sides above them with a win on Saturday. But Gary Robertson's 73rd minute goal for the visitors saw a close game turn into a heavy defeat. Portsmouth struck twice more before the final whistle blew. They could now overtake United if they win the game in hand they have over them. United finished the game with a makeshift defence after Sean Brisley and Michael Rains left the field due to injury. The Blues play Cheltenham tomorrow night and can't afford to slip up against opponents at the wrong end of the table.
Some of the other teams are going to have injuries, suspensions, players making decisions, strange decisions at strange times, and there's going to be some good play as well. That's part and parcel of the run-in so far. The good thing is we're involved in it. We're still in a very good position. There's pressure on other teams above us that haven't won games, didn't win games, and they'd be saying potentially missed an opportunity. We've got a good opportunity now to bounce back. On Tuesday, and then another big game on Saturday. Challenges that we look forward to, 2 away games back to back. See what we're about.
And Ryan, it seems we'll finally get to the end of the billionaire investor saga this week, won't we?
Yes, Pam, the club's chief executive, Nigel Clibbins, has said that a formal announcement will be made this week, ending 650 days of speculation. Yes, it's really been that long. So it seems that by the time United play Plymouth at the weekend, we'll know whether or not a deal with this mystery investor will be pursued or not. And frankly, that's got to be a good thing. It's been going on for far too long and is somewhat overshadowing what has been a great season on the pitch. Well, let's go to Scotland next, where Queen of the South won again at the weekend. They beat Raith Rovers 2-1 in the Championship. In League One, Stranraer beat Brecon City 2-0. Now, that's 5 games undefeated now for Stranraer as they battle against relegation. In League Two, Annan Athletic beat Clyde 1-0 and Berwick Rangers lost by the same margin. Let's turn to the Six Nations now, where Scotland had a fantastic win at the weekend. They beat Wales for the first time in a decade, and Hoyk's Stuart Hogg was instrumental again, absolutely devastating in attack. A fabulous piece of skill here to set up Tim Visser for a try. Beautiful fast hands. He's been an absolute star for them this year, and they'll now head to face England in a fortnight's time with a degree of optimism. Well, speaking of England, and they weren't anywhere near as good at the weekend. The scoreline against Italy flattered them. In the last 10 minutes, the floodgates opened. They got enough tries to claim a bonus point, but frankly, they weren't very good at all. And Eddie Jones and Steve Borthwick will know they've got a lot of work to do. They'll start against Scotland in the Calcutta Cup as favourites, but if Scotland can produce a first half like they did against Ireland and a second like they did against Wales, well, they should have a very good chance indeed. We'll end this evening with the Challenge Cup third round, where Whitehaven got their first win under new coach Carl Forster. They beat West Hull 18 points to 16. It was the same scoreline for Workington Town at the weekend. Sadly, though, they were on the losing end when they faced Newcastle Thunder. And York City Knights put out Egremont Rangers. They lost 48 points to 8. And that is all your sport from here this evening.
Thanks very much, Ryan. Good to hear you and see you again.
The ITV Evening News continues at 6:30.
The 5-year-old who died hours after a GP refused to see her. Ellie May and her mother were late for her appointment. She was told to return the next morning, but she died just 5 hours later. The first victims give evidence to the troubled child sex abuse inquiry more than 2 years after it was set up. And
there's a mistake.
That jaw-dropping moment the Oscars messed up. We examine exactly what went wrong. Well, do join me for those stories and more at 6:30.
Welcome, Ross. Weather time. We've ticked off an E in the storm letters.
Yeah, Storm Ewan came and went yesterday. It was actually the Irish Met Office that called it, so it affected them more than us. But it's still got windy and blustery, and today, real change, winter's come back. Yeah, have a look. This is
happy about this, are we?
No, this is Selkirk. Just a couple of hours ago, so you can see a couple of centimetres of snow falling there, and it tends to be the Scottish Boards that seem to have seen the bulk of it. This picture here was sent in by Ruth Robertson from Peebles, again, just a short while ago. So, yeah, proper winter scenes. We do expect a bit of snow in February, nothing too unusual, but when it does hit, it takes us a bit by surprise sometimes. But the rain came in, the temperatures were so low.
It's OK if it takes us by surprise. It's worrying if it's you.
No, we've been seeing snow showers all day. Don't blame me. It was in the forecast, but yeah, whenever it's the right period. It's snow. I know. We've got cold weather over the UK. This is a jet stream here, dragging that cold weather down. So winter is here to stay for a few days. Sorry about it. Here's your forecast.
Algarve Holidays from Thomas Cook, sponsors of the ITV Border Weather.
Well, we're coming towards the end of February, but the winter weather is here to stay for now at least. Today, quite a few showers around, some of those merging to form longer spells of rain, and over higher ground we have seen a dusting of snow. That's going to continue over the next couple of hours, clearing overnight, leaving us with calm, cold, clear conditions for many, but it is staying on the changeable, unsettled side as we head through the rest of the week. We've got low pressure nearby. It's not budging. It is just going to keep bringing these unsettled conditions in, predominantly from the west, spells of rain, and as that encounters that colder air above around 300-400 metres, that's where the risk is that it will turn to snow, even down to lower levels actually as we head through the late evening and initially overnight. So for the next few hours, things gradually clearing up. We're going to see these clearer skies developing over Dumfries and Galloway, gradually reaching out to the Scottish borders, Cumbria as well. With those clearer skies and lighter winds, sadly, actually the best of our conditions for a little while. Sad that it's passing through overnight, because all it means for us is that temperatures will be dropping right down, around freezing for our towns and cities. In those more rural spots in the countryside, it's going to get down to quite easily -2, -3 degrees. So that warning in place for ice as we wake up tomorrow morning. Untreated surfaces could be quite treacherous first thing. So into the day, initially dry and bright if you're up early enough, but the cloud is going to thicken from the west once again as the second area of low pressure starts to show its hand. It's going to bring in quite a bit of rain to western parts of the region. For the east, though, sheltered by the higher ground, clearer and calmer with some sunny spells around, although temperatures for all of us on the chilly side between 5 and 7 degrees are daytime high. For the next few days, we are looking at spells of rain and temperatures will stay on the chilly side.
Algarve Holidays from Thomas Cook, sponsors of the ITV Border Weather.
Thank you very much, Ross. Good presenting. Not the best, though. Before we finished, it is congratulations to Pam, who was named as the best presenter of the year for the North East and Cumbria at the Royal Television Society Awards on Saturday night.
You just like embarrassing me, don't you?
It was superb. Well done you. Pam's winning entry included the Look Around programme that she presented live from Hadrian's Wall ahead of the EU referendum.
Hello, we're on the edge of empire for a Look Around special. It's just 10 days to the referendum on whether the UK remains part of the European Union or decides to leave. How would a vote either way affect our region?
Well, it was a glittering ceremony, as you can see, at the Hilton in Gateshead. And Pam, let's have a look at what you had to say when you were announced as the winner.
Thank you so much. I'm a bit speechless and I can't speak because my mouth is so dry because I'm nervous. This is fantastic.
She said more than that. That was the
Your
best
mouth
bit.
does go dry when you're nervous, though, doesn't it? Yeah, I didn't have a drink of water, but it was fantastic to receive, and it's teamwork at the end of the day, isn't it? We all work as a team.
I don't know about that. Well played you. 3 times in 4 years. Wasn't just Pam receiving the big award. Our colleague Fiona Armstrong, who currently presents Border Life, was also given an Outstanding Contribution Award in recognition of her years of service to television. Congratulations to them all. Good night.
Good night.